February 24th, 1989. Honolulu International Airport, Hawaii. Late evening, island air still heavy with heat. United Airlines Flight 101 prepares for the long overnight journey to Auckland. Out on the ramp, a Boeing 747-122 waits under the floodlights, its vast white fuselage reflecting the glow. Mechanics have signed the logs, baggage handlers finish loading containers into the belly, and ground crews close the cargo doors with heavy final clunks. To most eyes, it is just another jumbo jet on just another night, nothing remarkable at all. In the cockpit, Captain David Cronin, an experienced pilot nearing retirement, runs through checklists with his crew. Beside him, First Officer Al Slater and Flight Engineer Randall Thomas monitor systems and fuel, talking in the quick, efficient rhythm of professionals who have done this many times. Weather looks routine. Flight plan looks routine. Everything about this evening looks perfectly ordinary. Passengers settle into their seats for the Trans-Pacific leg. Some wrestle carry-ons into overhead bins. Others tuck blankets around their legs. The cabin crew, led by Purser Claire McKenzie, smile, stoke carts, and mentally map out their service routine. Somewhere beneath their feet, in the forward cargo hold, sits a large outward opening door, secured by latches, motors, and locks. To the passengers, it is invisible, just part of the hidden machinery that moves their bags. The design is meant to be efficient, allowing maximum space. On paper, it is safe. But buried inside that door are vulnerabilities that engineers have raised concerns about before tonight. Flight 811 lifts off from Honolulu not long after midnight, engines heaving the heavy jet into the dark Pacific sky. Lights of the island slide away, then disappear into black ocean. Inside, the cabin slowly hushes as people recline seats, unlace shoes, and tug headphones into place. The gentle vibration of the climb lulls some into early sleep. In the cockpit, the crew levels the aircraft at around 22,000 feet. Everything looks normal on the instrument panel. Pressurization, electrical systems, hydraulics, all within limits. They chat quietly, discussing fuel burn, routing, and the long night ahead. Somewhere on the floor beneath them, a subtle mechanical defect waits for its moment. In the forward cargo hold, an electrical issue in the door's locking system is believed, later, to play a deadly part. Investigators will eventually focus on wiring that may allow the door to move even while indicators show it as locked. Tonight, of course, no one up front can see the microscopic arcs of current, the slight strain on metal, the first whispered signs of failure. Outside, the jet plows through cold, thinning air, speed nearing cruise. The pressure inside the cabin, carefully regulated, stays comfortable, mimicking a much lower altitude. The hull holds the difference between the inside world and the deadly thin air outside. On countless flights, this invisible balance holds steady. On this one, that balance is about to shatter in a fraction of a second. Without warning, a violent shudder rips through the front of the aircraft. Passengers feel the floor jump under their feet. A split second later, there is a deep metallic bang from somewhere ahead. A sound not like turbulence, not like normal flight. Heads snap up, conversations stop. Then the world explodes into wind.
What the hell was that?
Warning chimes slice through the low murmur of the cabin. The floor shudders once, then again, harder. Overhead bins snap open, masks drop, papers lift as if gravity suddenly forgets its job. People look up, eyes wide, searching for answers in the faces of strangers. The forward cargo doors blown outward, tearing away from the fuselage. In an instant, a section of the right side of the aircraft's nose rips open, including part of the cabin floor above. Pressurized air, desperate to escape, blasts out through the new hole, dragging anything and anyone not firmly secured toward the void. The sound is like standing beside a jet engine at full thrust. Rows of seats near the rupture are torn from their mounts. Passengers in that section have no time to react. Oxygen masks snap down throughout the cabin. Lights flicker. Loose objects shoot toward the breach. Pillows, magazines, cups, shoes, fragments of ceiling panels, all disappearing into blackness. 9 passengers, seated near the gaping hole, are sucked out of the aircraft into the night. Others nearby cling to armrests and seat frames, feeling the pull of the decompression like an invisible hand dragging at their bodies. Survivors later describe a feeling of disbelief, the sense that what they're seeing cannot possibly be real. The airplane simply shouldn't be open to the sky. In the cockpit, alarms scream. The crew feel the jolt and hear the deafening roar behind them. The cabin altitude warning horn blares as pressure collapses. Red and amber lights flash on the overhead panel, and the aircraft lurches, its nose damaged, systems straining to compensate. The pilot's training takes over. Hands reach for oxygen masks, for throttles, for the emergency descent checklist. Flight attendants slam into the reality of the situation in the dark, chaotic cabin. Some are knocked off their feet by the force of the decompression. They grab onto whatever they can, but they start shouting commands trying to cut through the roar. Put on masks, stay seated, buckle belts. The temperature in the cabin plunges. Outside air, far below freezing, pours in. Passengers gasp into thin oxygen as they fumble with masks. Those close to the rupture see only darkness beyond the torn fuselage and feel the wind clawing at their legs. The outline of the missing cabin wall is jagged, surreal, like a torn piece of paper against the night. Captain Cronin and his crew push the nose down, initiating an emergency descent toward thicker air. Engines spool as thrust is adjusted to keep the damaged jet controllable. The altimeter unwinds rapidly as they dive toward a level where passengers can survive even if their masks fail. The nearby ocean below, invisible in the darkness, becomes their only landing option if they cannot make it back to land. The cockpit crew declare an emergency and turn back toward Honolulu. Their voices are strained but steady, clipped phrases over the radio, describing explosive decompression, structural damage, injuries on board. Air traffic controllers clear a path, diverting other flights, lighting the way for an aircraft that may, or may not, be structurally able to complete the turn and approach. These are minutes in which every mile matters. Despite the massive damage, the 747 structure holds together. Systems are degraded but functioning. The crew manage to level off at a safer altitude and line up with Honolulu. Approach and landing checklists, usually routine, become deliberate acts of will. They must slow the aircraft without losing control, configure flaps and gear while considering the stress on an already weakened airframe. As they descend toward the runway, the cabin crew prepare passengers for impact. They demonstrate brace positions, shout over the roar, urge everyone to keep belts tight and heads down. The roar of the slipstream is joined by the rising whine of engines as power is adjusted for landing. For many on board, time stretches. Every second from now until touchdown feels far too long, and yet far too short. The damaged jet thunders onto the runway in Honolulu, tires squealing, spoilers rising. The landing is firm but controlled. As weight settles onto the wheels, a new sound takes over. The explosive decompression's roar is replaced by the harsh, rhythmic thump of the runway. Engines roar in reverse. Braking systems strain, and at last, the aircraft shudders to a stop. For a heartbeat, there is only stunned silence inside. Then sound rushes back in, crying, coughing, shouts, the clipped instructions of the crew. Fire trucks and emergency vehicles race toward the aircraft, lights strobing across the torn fuselage. From the outside, the scale of the damage is shockingly clear. A large section of the right forward fuselage is simply gone. Rows of seats that once lined that area are missing, torn away into the sky. Investigations eventually focus on the cargo door's design and its locking mechanism. Concerns about outward opening doors, warnings from earlier incidents, and issues with electrical systems come under sharp scrutiny. Changes are made, redesigns, updated procedures, and modifications to prevent similar failures. Airlines and manufacturers reinforce the lesson that even a small flaw, left unaddressed, can become catastrophic when exposed to the forces of high-altitude flight. For aviation safety, Flight 8101 becomes a case study in structural vulnerability, crew resource management, and the importance of listening to early warning signs. For survivors, it remains a night frozen in memory. The roar of escaping air, the cold, the fear, and the unlikely return to Earth. And if a cargo door tearing open mid-flight feels unthinkable, wait until you hear about the captain pulled halfway out of his cockpit window on British Airways Flight 55390. Clicking here completes that picture of survival in the sky. See you there.